Don't spend your morning playing catch up. WRVA and the city's alive. 7 a.m. It's go time, Richmond.
All right, it's 7:04 this morning here on Richmond's Morning News. My name is Rich Herrera. Thanks for joining us this morning. We've got a lot to talk about. One of the things that we're keeping an eye on, there's a couple court cases, one against the president. Let me make sure I don't conflate the two. Yesterday, the president had a big setback from a judge that overturned a lot of what he wants to do as far as election rules. And White House Deputy Director Stephen Miller went out and said, hey, listen, John Roberts, I know you don't control these judges, but the Supreme Court needs to start looking at how some of these judges are just going so far this way, so far that way, in some of these rulings that they're having nationwide ramifications on some of these. Now, the other thing that we're watching is SCOTUS is about to, the Supreme Court of the United States, is set to rule on birthright citizenship and female sports. Let's go talk with Sam Dorman right now from the Epoch Times, where he covers the Supreme Court, and he's joining us here on News Radio WRVA. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. Okay, so two big there's a bunch of cases before the Supreme Court, but the one that people are watching that we might be able to see a decision here in the next 48 hours maybe, one is on birthright citizenship. Give us the background of what the arguments were and what we're waiting for.
Sure, yeah. So they're going to have release opinions at around 10 a.m. today. So I think you'll get some big opinions then, and then I'm guessing they're going to do some more opinion days next week. So birthright citizenship may be this week or next week. It's not really clear. But basically that one is about the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, just, that people who are born here are allowed to be, they're automatically citizens. But, Trump has kind of challenged the longstanding interpretation within the executive branch that all children of illegal immigrants and sort of these more temporary visitors receive that citizenship. And they're basically saying, that if you come to the country and if you're born in the country, your parents should have some kind of allegiance or some kind of like permanent residence before you could actually become a citizen. So there's this big debate over what the 14th Amendment actually means and what its phrasing means, and then also what the Supreme Court and Congress have already said about the issue.
So what were the arguments for and against? Because I don't think the founding fathers would have anticipated tourism, birthright tourism. And we see that people will come over in their third trimester from China, be here for 2 weeks, give birth, then go back home. But that baby they have now has U.S. citizenship when they return back to China.
Right. Yeah. And I think Justice Alito brought this up during oral arguments in April. He's saying, back when this amendment was passed or around the time of, early in our history, we didn't really have, or there wasn't as much of a concept of illegal immigration as what we have now. It's very, I think, a different situation. That being said, the Supreme Court did rule, there's this landmark case from 1898. It's called United States, it's called Wong Kim Mark, basically. And it's about a Chinese man who was considered to be a citizen based on the fact that his parents were permanently domiciled here. And so the ACLU and other groups are basically saying that, that decision shows that people that are born here receive citizenship, and that, that the reasoning in that decision points to this expansive definition of citizenship. The Trump administration, again, is saying that even in that case, because that guy's parents were domiciled here, it shows that there has to be some kind of, stronger allegiance for their kids to have citizenship.
Well, and then you have the anchor baby issue, where once someone who's here without permission, without papers, illegally in the country, they have the baby here. That baby is the anchor that the rest of the family comes over to be with that child who has all the rights and privileges of a United States citizen.
I think it's something like if you're, when you turn 21 or after a certain amount of time, you can request that your parents receive a green card, basically.
Exactly. So we'll wait for that. We might see that today. One of the other ones I think is on the docket, female sports. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's one that's probably going to go in favor of conservatives and what the Trump administration, the type of position they've taken. And it's just, Idaho and West Virginia, there's been a bunch of different state laws on this issue, but Idaho and West Virginia were the ones that made it to the Supreme Court, and just basically trying to ban, boys from participating in girls' sports. And so there's a big discussion about whether or not the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment basically guarantees that quote unquote transgender athletes should be able to participate in these other, the opposite sex sports. And so I think the Supreme Court's they're going to have a pretty big ruling, I think, about that, but also Title IX, which is this civil rights law that prevents sex-based discrimination within educational context. And that one I think is pretty interesting because there's this argument that basically, Title IX was passed specifically to give women separate spaces so they could have equality in that way with men. And that obviously, there's this argument that if you allow men in those sports, then you're denying them equality and then discriminating against them.
And again, we'll see how these two come out. What are court watchers saying? Are they anticipating that we're going to have, kind of down that middle where we have Sotomayor and Jackson Brown going one way, Kagan going the other, and then the rest of the court going this way? Or do we think we're going to get a bigger majority?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. So I think, based on the oral arguments, I think the 6 conservative justices will almost certainly support Idaho and West Virginia. I think maybe Kagan, I'm trying to think back to what she said during the oral arguments, but I remember there was some kind of some of what she was saying, some of the things she was saying, it seemed like she might be more willing to support Idaho and West Virginia's laws. So maybe 7-2, I don't know, 6-3 at least.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because we have all of these cases coming up, and I see more of these cases that are probably going to head over there because we're seeing so many federal judges or local judges putting their 2 cents in, making some of these decisions that affect the entire country. And I just see more of these bubbling up over the rest of this administration into the Supreme Court. So we'll see whether we continue to see the 6-3 split, or we'll start saying, okay, wait a minute, lower courts, maybe you guys need to chill out a little bit, or lower courts, yeah, absolutely, let's keep doing this and we'll reinforce what we're seeing in the lower courts.
Yeah, I think so. And Trump, it's a big term for Trump too. I mean, he's been blocked by so many of these different lower courts, but I think that he's going to end up being victorious in some pretty significant ways, specifically with how lower courts have blocked his ability to fire federal officials. So I think that's probably one of the biggest decisions. The Supreme Court's going to overturn this longstanding precedent, basically restricting the president's ability to fire heads of agencies like the FTC.
Does for people that are court watchers, does the rulings like this give chill or give energy to those lower courts that just seem to be making these blanket decisions like the one we saw about whether people, when it comes to voting, all of a sudden there's a federal court, this is now the law of the land, and I've made this decision that affects all Americans. With these rulings that are going in Trump's favor, does that lower the temperature down for and give those lower courts some pause? Or are we continuing just to see we're going to push back against Donald Trump when we have a liberal court down and they handpick and go court shopping for a judge that they think will be open to their argument?
No, I don't think it's really. I mean, just from what I've seen, I don't think that those judges are really changing that much. I think they're still going to be resisting. No, I mean, they're not exactly resisting the Supreme Court, but they're still, they're continuing to block Trump's policies. And there's even been some conflict between the Supreme Court and the lower courts, where the Supreme Court has had to say, hey, you're not following what we said, because there's kind of these more interim decisions on the emergency docket where the Supreme Court says something very brief and then it goes back to the lower court. And there's been a couple instances where the Supreme Court has said, hey, you're not really following our reasoning on this.
All right, so we'll keep an eye. 10 o'clock. We might see some of these come out. I'm sure Brian Kilmeade's going to be all over this, Dana Will and Jeff Will. So we'll see what happens, especially with the birthright citizenship and if they rule on men and women's sports. Sam, I appreciate you joining us. What are you working on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, you can just find me the epochtimes.com. And I'm just, going to be all over these court cases for at least the next week.
All right. Well, hey, lots of court cases, lots of work for you. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Rich. Have a good one.
All right. Take care. Sam Dorman, Epoch Times. And again, that's going to be a big deal. If the Supreme Court rules one way, and if they're leaning towards 6-3, saying trans athletes cannot participate in girls' sports, that will have ramifications in the midterms because it'll be something the Democrats will run on. Look, this transphobia from Donald Trump, and this will get that base fired up. Immigration will be another one, but that's an interesting one because you don't have 100 universal support among some of the minority communities, believe it or not, in the polls will tell you that. You do have a lot of liberals who will go, look, Donald Trump is being this and that and everything else. Either way the Supreme Court goes, it's going to fire up members of the base on both sides. We'll see what happens if it's 6-3. Then we're going to go, okay, party lines, and we'll use it for this fundraising, that fundraising. So we'll have to see what happens. But again, 10 o'clock, some of those court decisions should be coming down just about when we get off the air. So Brian will be covering those as they come down with the full force of Fox News. All right, today's program brought to you in part by GreerFinancialGroup.com. What